welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest, good friend, Father Leo Patalinghug. And the book is Saving the Family, The Transformative Power of Sharing Meals with People You Love, published by our friends at Sophia Institute Press. Always great to see you.
Thank you very much.
As people can see, I love to eat, so I'm very interested in your programs and your wonderful recipes that you always have in here.
Yeah, and I put them in the back because I wanted to not confuse the real content with the recipes, and it just makes it easier people to get to the recipes that they want.
Now, you dedicated this book, Saving the Family, to your family, right?
Correct. My family here on earth, and obviously even the family that we have around the world, but more importantly, the family that we hope to join with in heaven.
Mm-hmm. What's different about this than some of your earlier works?
So glad that you asked, because a lot of people know me as the cooking guy and they just think, oh, we want the recipes, but they forget the power of food. And so the big difference with this book, and actually I built off of my previous book, which was called Epic Food Fight, The Theology of Food. This book actually tells you how to do the theology. How do you actually practically become that family you are called to feed?
You said here, as a professional cook, I thought about presenting this information like a recipe, a list of ingredients with simple steps to follow so that every family can benefit from them. But you decided not to do that.
Yeah, no, because it got a little too corny, to be honest with you. And even though I love Doritos because it's corn, I really wanted to just understand what a family goes through in their dynamic. So the book is really about how to stay a family when you're feeding your kids mashed peas to when at one point they're feeding you mashed peas. So I wanted to do an evolution of family life.
Now, do you ever use your skill set as a black belt and a break dancer when cooking?
That would be a little dangerous. I'd have to get anointed before I tried that. No, but here's what I do use. I use those elements of performing to what we've got to do with serving our faith. It's called plating. So I want to make sure that the presentation is something that's going to engage people, get them excited, and more importantly, digest what we're feeding them.
Have we seen that more where presentation has become more important than the way food is served?
Absolutely. It's generally one of the three characteristics for what makes a great meal. It is creativity, it is taste, and it's presentation. Right. And what I want to do is focus on all of those things and present the Catholic faith in a creative way. But if you notice, I actually don't have my name, Father Leo, on there because I wrote this book with the intention of those good Catholic parents whose kids don't go to church anymore. Right. You can still give them this book without sounding preachy.
Right, without them thinking, oh, here's the recipes.
From a Catholic priest.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, this is kind of, I'm being catechized on the side here.
And they are, without them even
without them realizing. And
That's
you talk about, over the years, I've been humbled and amazed to discover how universal our struggles can be. With 40% of Americans working more than 50 hours, everyone is struggling to make time, which is important, and that 40% of American households are in debt. And you talk about the fact that what's really key is regular family meals.
Yes, so everyone always asks me, well, how do I have a family meal when I'm so busy? And I always tell them, you either master your schedule or your schedule masters you. And even though I love using Catholic guilt, I don't want to make people feel I can't have a meal every day with my family and make that the deal breaker. Regular is key, which means I, as a parent, have to talk to my children as to when their schedule and my schedule can match up. Right. And that regularity gives each other the responsibility.
And as you put in here, also in following that, you get increased academic performance, improved communication, lower high-risk behavior, cultivate healthy eating habits, improve emotional well-being. So there's all these benefits of doing it. And like you said, sometimes people use the fact, well, there's no way we can do it all the time, so let's not do it at all.
It's so commonsensical, but people don't practice common sense. The fast food mentality has creeped into our psyche, and it basically says, I'm too busy to care. But the reality is, and even sociology gives us this fact, the improvement for health and well-being happens with a regular family meal.
And you talk about families getting together, and you talk about the idea of them being as intricate as the most temperamental souffle, or souffles tend to be temperamental?
Yes, you've got to have all of the right kind of ingredients, and you have to understand temperature, which is why in one of the chapters, I make families understand the temperament of a child. Because the fact is, not every lesson that you're going to get from a self-help book is going to apply to kid A as it is going to apply to kid C. So what I'm asking parents to do is stop trying to get a program and get more in touch with the process of engaging your family.
Now, are you the latest superhero?
I like that you said that, because superhero is a super fun term, because I really believe that the person who provides meals for their family is a hero. And they prove it by spending that time with their children. And so superhero, I think our world needs more of them.
You say, did you know the average American family spends only 8 hours together each week, and that's just 36 minutes a day?
That's right.
And you'd say the top 5 reasons for not getting to enough family time: work, chores, schoolwork, TV screen time, extracurricular activities, etc. You say many families end up feeling like the average hour a day together in front of the TV, 60 minutes, is about all they've got. And even today,
Correct.
with the way young people are, even if they're sitting in the same room and you're watching TV, they're probably not watching the TV.
That's right. Unless they're watching Bookmark or Savoring Our Faith on EWTN.
On a regular basis.
On a regular basis. Right. Let's be honest.
Maybe that's punishment if it's Bookmark, I have to say.
I even have told churches when I give conferences, and I will do some consultation for parishes, you've got to actually relax on the schedule too, because we're literally pulling families apart. Youth, young adults, seniors, men, women's conferences. When can we actually come together and be a family?
Right.
Dinner.
You said we can be victims, we can be villains, we can be what our families really need. Break those down.
So you have a choice. You can either be the hero, or you could be the victim saying, oh, woe is me, everything is rough, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time. Or you could be the villain, which basically means you're inflicting pain on people by not doing something good for them. Let's admit it. We have in the Catholic faith sins of omission, which are just as bad as sins of commission. By not doing something good for your family, you're committing a great harm to them.
Right. I like the idea, the imagery you have about a husband and wife maybe working together to have the family meal as a dynamic duo.
Yeah, a dynamic duo, but let's admit, this book even covers that. We know that families comes in so many different shapes and sizes, and we as a Catholic Church, we're not here to judge you. We're here to make sure that you know you've got a family. It's called God's family, the human family. I mean, the fact is, even in my own perfect family, it's far from my dad says, my family, we put fun in dysfunction. And what we've got to do is show that perfection is really seen in fidelity to each other.
Say here, superheroes tackle head-on the problems facing modern families. Superheroes don't look for the quick fix or the easy route.
Yeah, and I think when I'm saying that, I'm saying it's easy to avoid the hard things in life. And the hard thing in life is to make time for your family. And even though it sounds like something that everyone wants to do, let's admit it, it's easy to bring your work home and kind of treat your family as an extension of your job. But it's hard to just simply say, I'm going to just put it all away. And when I'm here with my family, this is what's going to matter most.
You say, and the way that's laid out, obviously you've got different functions and little boxes of information, so it's easily readable. You have exercises at the end, so it's all laid out that way in very nice chapters. In this one, Food for Thought, what is your role? My concept of the family superhero stems from my experience in seminary working with a faith formation director.
Correct.
How so?
All right, so this is the beauty. I actually give parents a new task, which might make it easier for them ultimately. Sometimes they think parenting is about educating or nourishing, but I say it's about formation. Your job is ultimately to be a formation director for your children, to help bring out their best qualities, help them to manage their vices and their issues, and more importantly, as a priest, as a seminarian becoming a priest would have a formation director. Ultimately, a parent's job is to form their children into a saint.
Anatomy of a superhero: grateful heart, clear eyes, open arms, questioning mind, and patience, which obviously in families comes. And you talk about what a healthy family is. You're a very positive guy, priest, as you present, but you also point out this fact: Americans have a negativity bias. According to a 2016 study, American Council on Science and Health, only 6% of Americans believe the world is getting better.
Yep, people are Generally, let's put it this way. The devil is very hard at work. And I don't want to replace hope with optimism, but I want to challenge people and ask them, are we just negative people in general? And it comes about at the dinner table. That's why it takes literally supernatural strength to make the family meal something that people will look forward to.
Right, and as you alluded to earlier in the family story, you talk about the idea that it's never too late to get started,
That's
regardless
right.
of maybe what's happened before in your life.
Woe is me, it happens all the time. My family never grew up eating meals. I wouldn't even know what to do with it. Oh, my kids are too old. We're starting too late. Those are things.
I'm not a good cook.
I'm not a good cook. Exactly. Right. Those are things of the devil, to be honest with you. And here's why. To feed people is an act of love. It's an act of God's grace. He said it. Do you love me, Peter? Yes, I do. Then feed my sheep. Right. He had to become a fisherman, turned into the universal shepherd.
I know one of the stories that struck me later in the book, you talk about this guy was talking about, I don't know if it was his mother or his grandmother, who really wasn't a very good cook.
Sure.
But it meant so much to him because she tried all the time.
He ate it anyway.
Right.
He ate it anyway. And again, food is one thing. The comfort that nourishes the soul is the other. They will always remember a bad meal. They talked about it at the funeral. He says, she was a horrible cook. And he had to say, bless me, Father, because she was a horrible cook. But I will miss those meals. You know, eat horrible food in memory of a loving mom.
Still had a lot of love mixed into that.
You got it.
Food.
You know, food cannot replace the person.
Now, you included exercises in this particular one. It's keep track of where your time goes, consider what a healthy family looks like, pay attention to your strengths and weaknesses. Whose idea was it to put exercises in?
It was mine, because I think one of our struggles in the Catholic Church is pastoral practicality. How do we take our faith and put it into practice? This book is basically a Jesuit version of an examen for your family. Examine where it kind of is healthiest and where it's weakest. And really the exercise is, because if we don't practice our faith, we're not going to get better at it. And so all this is, and someone who was a secular author said, this book is amazing. It's like a self-help for the family without a program, but really engage the mental process.
Well, we
That's
are
all it
practicing
is.
Catholics. We've got to keep practicing.
You got to.
Remember,
Practice makes perfect.
Right, exactly. Chapter 2, Who's on Your Team? Exploring Your Family Dynamics. I thought this was good. You said, it's important to remember that this isn't Hell's Kitchen. You aren't Gordon Ramsay. Your goal isn't to force your family to meet your desired outcome. So it doesn't matter if the risotto is underdone then.
Well, exactly. I mean, who cares if it's al dente? and I'm glad that you mentioned risotto, because it leads to a particular chapter where I dedicate it to grandparents. And so this idea of who's on your team, take into account not just your immediate family, but who are all the neighbors that might pop in? Who are the uncles and the aunts? And let's not forget the incredibly necessary grandparents, the wisdom figures of the family. This is a book that really focuses on the bigger picture of family.
Humility. What does that have to do with cooking?
Oh my gosh. I mean, how many times have you made some, well, maybe not you, but I've made things and it just didn't turn out well. But more importantly, to know that, gosh, I failed in this aspect, but I've got to keep trying. I want to make sure that the parent who has to drive by and feed their kids fast food in the car to sports practice, you're still doing something powerful. Just do it intentionally.
In the next chapter, you have your superhero power. You found that the best way to satisfy, and you have in here kind of like the classic food pyramid, and then you've got Maslow's pyramid as well.
That's right.
Staying balanced and healthy with my favorite 4-letter word. It's a good one, though. It's food.
Exactly.
F-O-O-D. I'm not just talking about what satisfies our bellies. I'm talking about something deeper, something that all our families are craving, even if they don't know it. I'm talking about, and this is your food, fidelity, obedience, opportunity, and discernment.
You know,
did you come up with that?
I did. In fact, I give this talk to also corporations that aren't even Catholic. And they've realized that there is something powerful in food. If a company wants to be strong, listen to the word, company is cum panis. They got to be able to break bread from the leaders to the workers. And what they're really craving is faithfulness, fidelity, obedience, which means I'm hearing you, opportunities, which means life ain't going to be boring, and discerning, because there are a lot of voices out there. We got to be able to, the image is sift what is valuable and what is not.
You refer to yourself as a foodie, and you talk about why different temperatures in relation to
That's
different
right.
temperaments of people. But you also make the note of, and you stuck in here under the family story, cookie cutter children.
Yeah, let's admit it. I mean, we love to compare our families to those that we can find on Pinterest and Instagram, and if they're worthy to be, you know, on the Christmas card picture. Fact is, all of us are broken. Let's not try to put them in a mold, but understand them as unique individuals.
So, have you ever taken off your training wheels before you decided to cook, or what does riding a bike and training wheels have to do with cooking?
I think it has to do with people just being afraid and trying something new. I can't tell you how many families have told me, I have not intentionally cooked meals for my family because I was afraid to be disappointed. You know, like that was one real disappointing thing, to know a husband didn't like his wife's cooking. And that was almost cause for a divorce. No, let's try this again, and let's make sure it's not about the food, but the process to engage strengthening relationships.
What's a meal buddy?
A meal buddy is someone, okay, I got this idea from a bunch of dads who would get together for cigars and trade recipes on what they were gonna barbecue for their families. It was a way to keep each other accountable. And it's almost like a coach in a sense, but a friend, a companion, someone who's gonna work with you, and just, hey, who doesn't wanna share a good recipe with a neighbor? And so you gotta know
And a
that you're
certain
not,
amount of encouragement
and
back
you're
and
not
forth and keep
doing
it
this
going.
alone.
Right, right.
Exactly. You're not doing this alone.
Okay, technology-free zone.
Yep.
We've seen that with people trying to say, maybe you can put your cell phone down for 2 minutes.
I get it. I get it, and we don't want the technology to interrupt. But here's where I get a little positive. Use the technology for your benefit, including a dad who actually Skyped his kids
Right, you
when they
mentioned
were
that, right.
away for a business meal, and mom and dad would coordinate the meal. Kids thought it was hysterical. Dad's eating the same thing I am. But more importantly, dad is part of our dinner conversation.
Right. Consider the conversation. Here's my secret. Instead of trying to force your kids to talk, create an environment that fosters, encourages, and expects conversation. Consider it the FEE, to eat. Foster, encourage, and expect.
That's right. And that is key, is developing a mentality for people. You know, if you're going to ask your kid, how was your day? The answer is going to be, fine. What did you learn? Nothing. They're not going to care. But how about this? How about if you say to your kids, you know, this is what I went through today. I'd love to get your advice on this. That's going to foster and encourage an expectation that if we're going to be sitting together, we're going to be human together, which means conversation.
So goldfish have longer attention spans. Is that because they don't use iPhones or something?
I think so. I think it's because they're colored gold too. I'm not quite sure, to
that
be
what
honest
it
with you.
is?
It was just an interesting fact.
Right, that we deal with so much, distraction in our world today, right?
And part of it is our fault. We allow ourselves to not experience a conversion, and here's the word, that comes from conversation turning towards each other. We in fact experience diversions, and that word leads to divorce.
Right.
So
I see, okay.
we've got to turn towards each other. I mean, Jesus even says it, Lord, make us turn to you, show us your face, we will be saved. FaceTime will save the family.
Right, and that may be on via Skype or FaceTime, either
That's
one,
right.
right? You could, if you're depending on which Apple device you might be using. Well, it's interesting too because you kind of have dealing with young kids, and then you've got teenagers, and then young adults, and then adults,
And
children,
you're dealing with your parents.
and how each one you present a little differently. How is each one different?
Well, the book tries to chronicle, and I actually did a lot of research with sociologists on how to maintain healthy relationships as your children become adults, and then they become, almost in a sense, your caretakers as well. And what we've got to do is, if we can understand that dynamic, then we can adjust things ever so slightly so that we can have the one thing that communicates love and respect: time together around a meal. People think that this is a little too simple, but why do we make it complicated? What's complicated is when we don't understand how I have changed, how they have changed. How can we still fit together?
Right, and even though teenagers may complain, it doesn't mean they don't notice it in a positive way.
In fact, it's a lie for parents to believe that kids are not listening to you.
Right.
They, by science and by all measures of sociology, kids, and this is the statistic, what kids value most is spending time with their family, because there you can develop the trust that says, hey, I'm going to need a little extra money. Can I use the car a little later? If there's a trusting relationship, then guess what? You're going to get
Well,
that
you
$100.
say, did you know teens enjoy eating with their families? Research shows that a majority of teens desire having meals with their families.
That came from an MTV and Associated Press study. And so if it's coming from there, it's got to be true, or it's just common sense.
In that section, you've got one of those little blocks, family story, introducing family meals for teens, or to teens. One of the recipe testers from my first book never established regular family meals. He told me he wanted to start, but was afraid that his teenagers would make it difficult. So there's a question you can begin again, but what exactly is a recipe tester?
A recipe tester is when
can I sign up?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. In fact, a recipe tester is just someone who you're just talking to and saying, hey, I'm thinking about making this tonight. Would you like to help me out? And basically you're engaging them in the process of not just feeding them, but serving them. And in that conversation back to you, you can hear a little bit more about who they are. Oh, I don't really like this food. Have you tried this food? Let's try this together. And this happens when they're a little bit older, because why? Teenagers want nothing more than be treated like an adult. So treat them like an adult.
What's the new timeout when you talk about dealing with teenagers?
You know what? Have you ever seen parents say, you know, you're not being very good. You go to your room. That's the worst thing you can do to discipline your child, because for a kid, that's not discipline, that's divinity. They love it. I don't have to talk to you. The new time out is treating young people, again, like the adults they want to be. If I say to them, hey, you know what, we haven't really engaged in conversation, and for that reason, I don't know if I can trust you that you're going to talk to me if you're going to experience any trouble if you're going out. So guess what? You're not going out tomorrow. Taking away those responsibilities, but telling them why. And then really what you're doing is saying, gosh, in order for me to be treated like an adult, I got to act like one, even at dinner.
And you make the point in here that teenagers don't feel like adults, and you even deal with young adults who are then dependent on their parents feeling like they're not really adults.
That's correct. And so what I like to tell parents as they have children coming into that age is just start saying, hey, guess what? You're going to take care of this meal today. And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, I mean, because part of being an adult is taking care of people you love. And so if you don't have this practice now, you're never going to get it. And you're going to think, I am here to be served rather than to serve, which is why I sell aprons.
There you go. So your take on them, there's multiple takes on the story of the prodigal son. Yours is that he was very hungry and that's why he came home.
But it's God's honest truth.
Okay.
And it's the God's honest truth. And what was the dad hungering for? To have that time together as the family. And what did that older brother not want? To eat with his family. And so food was the one thing that made that story so real.
And you also make the point that mission critical in Chapter 9, continuing regular meals after your children have flown the coop.
Correct.
The empty nester effect.
Yes, exactly. And there was a time when even just my mom and dad kind of felt like, gosh, what's the point? And I said, here's the point, because we're going to come back and we want to make sure that you are practicing what you preach to us. So to not engage in dinner dates with the spouse that you always loved to go out to dinner with before you had the kids. What changed? Again, we're all evolving. What we've got to do is pay attention to the process to stay engaged.
Yeah, well, husband and wife to parents and getting back to being a husband and wife at the same time.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, at the back, you have your Supper Heroes' favorite recipes, and I think there's about 22. I think it's
there's at least 20 plus in there because some of the recipes kind of can be interchanged. For example, like, what do you do with leftover chicken tenders? Well, first of all, do people even know how to make chicken tenders? Then what do you do with them afterwards?
Well, let me ask you, in doing that, do these then vary by complexity?
Yes and no. And I'm glad that you asked, because a lot of times people will look at a book and say, I don't know if I can do that. In this case, every recipe is quote unquote simple enough. And if it's complex, it's for a reason. It's to help you engage this thought process as part of the exercise to deepen the message from that chapter.
I see you're very ecumenical. You have East and West pasta.
Correct. Correct. And basically it's a reminder that if you take, say, a pound of pasta, or 2 pounds if your family's a big eater, you can divide that in half, pre-cook it in advance, and with simple ingredients, including the leftover packets you get from Chinese restaurants, you can actually turn spaghetti into lo mein. And it's a real gift to know that creativity and taste is what makes a winning dish for a family.
And you also have a couple of desserts here, right?
Sure. I'm not a
chocolate mousse.
dessert guy, which is why I try to stay
You mean
away
you
from.
don't like to make them, or you don't like to eat them?
I don't like to make them. I'll be very honest with you. I'm not a baker at heart. It requires way too much patience.
That's interesting. So you would see those as one being a chef and one being a baker.
Correct. Savory versus sweet. I'm definitely a savory chef. A lot of this stuff is kind of quick fire, but I do have some recipes for desserts. And why? Because it's to kind of talk about the challenging and the difficult things. Some things you don't want to talk about at the family dinner table, but maybe you can say to that child who's struggling, hey, why don't we go get an ice cream afterwards and just talk a little bit? So dinner stays dinner for the entire family, but if that one kid is struggling, 2 scoops of ice cream.
Now, you've continued to do your ministry, and you're doing some spots and things with us now, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm always pleased to continue savoring our faith.
Right.
Part of my mission is to not only create content, but even have my podcast where it's called Shoot the Shiitake with Father Leo. Talk to people who are...
I didn't want to go near that expression in this book. I'm happy you said
I'm glad,
it.
yeah, because it really is what I call the bittersweetness and the bitterness of conversations with people who may not agree with you. And so I try to make a connection to them. And so with the books and the TV spots and the bite-sized theology, there's a lot of hungry people.
Right, you talked about the shiitake hitting the fan, but I figured with that we'll have to leave it as always.
That's right.
Father Leo, it was always great to see you.
Cheers.
And the book, Saving the Family, The Transformative Power of Sharing Meals with People You Love, by the one and only Father Leo Patalinghug, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. Definitely worth checking it out and maybe cooking some of those recipes. A great idea. Join us next time right here on Bookmark.